You can build something for 26 years. It only takes one smirk to set fire to it. I've delivered this onboarding session 211 times. Same chairs, same battered projector, same laminated booklet I updated every February like clockwork. The conference room smelled faintly of dry erase markers and burned coffee. And the fresh recruits were arranged in a polite U-shape, eyes bouncing between my slides and the free pastries. They always started the same, eager, unsure, hungry for structure, and I gave them structure. Every time. My name is Ellis Rourke. I'm 53 years old. For the last 2.5 decades, I've been the senior training manager at Refton and Vale, a logistics software company that used to care more about doing things right than doing them fast. I built the company's first sales onboarding program from scratch in '99, back when everything still came on CDs and your email came with a manual. I trained the first 100 account reps they ever hired. A third of the exec team today sat in these sessions back when they wore clip-on ties and didn't know the difference between an upsell and a close. This morning's group was 5 people, 3 fresh out of college, 1 midlife career switcher, and a guy who used to sell insurance in Minnesota. Solid crew. They were asking the right questions, even the nervous ones. We were going over the Refton quote builder, and I was halfway through explaining margin thresholds when the door opened. She walked in like she owned the carpet under her shoes. Claire Bancroft, 24 years old according to her HR file. Boss's niece. And she made sure no one forgot it. 17 minutes late. No apology. She wore heels that probably cost more than my first car, and a blazer sharp enough to file a lawsuit with. She didn't sit, she scanned the room like she was measuring it for renovation. "Don't worry," she said, too loud, too fast. "I'll bring us into the 2020 seconds. He's a typewriter." She smiled when she said it, not like a joke, like a dismissal. The recruits laughed awkwardly. I didn't respond. I've learned. Silence can sting more than sarcasm. I kept talking. Moved to the next slide. If you give someone like Claire an inch of recognition, they'll take a mile of your authority. At break, she took my chair. Didn't ask, just parked herself there like it belonged to her and started scrolling on her phone. One stiletto crossed over the other. When I came back from the restroom, she looked up at me and said, "You've got a lot of notes. We'll probably streamline all this later." We? She stayed for the rest of the session, sort of, texted under the table. Interrupted twice to correct me on buzzwords she barely understood. When it came time for the quote simulation, she waved the class off early and told them they could just watch the demo video later. "Efficiency," she said. "You'll thank me." I watched 3 of them glance at each other in confusion before quietly filing out. One lingered behind, asking me if they'd still be tested on the margins. I told him, yes. Claire flounced over to the whiteboard and began crossing out entire segments of the workflow diagram I'd built over years. "We don't need this flowchart," she said. "Nobody reads process maps anymore. I'll just make a TikTok or something." By the time I cleaned up the markers and shut down the projector, she was packing her things. On her way out, she passed the stack of training binders I'd placed neatly in the bin labeled, "Return to Archive." She picked up mine, the original copy I'd kept updated since 2006, and tossed it into the recycling bin with a shrug. "You're done here," she said, already halfway out the door. "No hard feelings, right?" I looked down at the bin, then at the door, then at nothing. I didn't say a word. When I got back to my office, I opened the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. Inside were 26 years of records, printouts, flash drives, backup folders, even a CD labeled Q3 Pipeline Recovery Strategy 2004. Every change, every fix, every client save archived in silence. Claire thought she'd erased me by tossing a binder. She didn't know that I never built the company on paper. I built it in code, in memory, and in silence. At 6:45 a.m., my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter, screen lighting up against the dark granite. I was halfway through folding a paper towel into thirds, something I did out of habit every morning. The subject line read, "Urgent. Q3. Quote discrepancy. Sent from the sales VP. Copied. CEO, Finance, Legal." And, Claire, I didn't open it right away. Just let the phone sit there buzzing with follow-ups while I cracked 2 eggs into a skillet and turned the flame low. The coffee was already brewed. I had pre-sliced the toast the night before. Routine is insulation. When I did open the thread, I read every word slowly, like I was scanning an after-action report. Claire had issued a quote to Gibbons North, our biggest legacy client. She'd used the internal service rate $0.68 per unit instead of the $1.10 standard external tier. Across the volume, it came out to a $45,000 shortfall. 45 grand sliced clean out of our profit margin with one click. The CEO was reviewing options. The client hadn't replied since the invoice hit their inbox at 5:32 p.m. yesterday. Silence from a client like that is a warning flare. I finished my eggs, wiped down the counter, and placed the folded towel under the butter dish. At Refton and Vale, Gibbons North wasn't just another client. They were the client. I'd onboarded them myself in 2003, walked them through our early janky dashboard in a Holiday Inn conference room. They nearly walked in 2009, when our supply module crashed during peak demand. I stayed up for 38 hours building a custom workaround and flew to Michigan to present it in person. They renewed on the spot. I'd shaken the founder's hand and promised them we'd never let their business get caught in our gears again. Now Claire had jammed the gears on her second full day. She didn't call me. Didn't ask. Didn't even drop a note to double-check the rate structure. She went into the quoting tool, my quoting tool, and hit send, like she was placing a DoorDash order. Then, when the numbers didn't line up, she told the sales VP the tool wasn't intuitive and probably needs an overhaul. Her exact words, by 8:15 a.m., she was replying all, typing like a squirrel on espresso. The current quoting system was built for a different era, she wrote. It doesn't reflect modern client segmentation or dynamic pricing expectations. Translation: not my fault. She didn't mention the part where the system clearly flags internal use only in red next to the discounted tier. Or the prompt that says, confirm pricing override, Y, divided by N. The VP forwarded her message to the CEO, who replied, let's move forward with a system update to prevent this from recurring. And just like that, the wreckage had a new name on it. Mine. I didn't reply. I didn't log in to defend myself or chase the thread. I opened my personal drive instead. The one Claire didn't know existed. The one I'd kept since before Refton even moved out of its first office park. I scrolled through the folders. Quotes. Divided by Gibbons North. Divided by 2023Q3 pending. Inside was the exact quote template Claire had pulled. Time-stamped. Version locked. Audit tracked. I had a screen recording from 2 weeks ago showing the correct client tier, the updated language, and the double confirmation prompt that she had to ignore to submit that rate. I'd even annotated the workflow for new hires. There was a PDF titled, quote, Submission, Common Errors, and How to Avoid Them. Her initials weren't on a single line of it. They'd buried the manual, but they forgot who wrote it. The email hit my inbox at exactly 8 a.m. Subject line, exit interview, HR. No preamble, no warning. Just a 15-minute block on my calendar like it had always been there. I read it once, then again. Nothing in the body except, please report to HR Suite 4B. Claire will be present. I didn't bring anything with me. Left my mug on the desk, still half full with the coffee I brewed from beans I kept in a locked drawer. The hallway was quiet. People avoided eye contact. The way they do when they smell blood but don't want the scent on their hands. Suite 4B had been painted recently. New coat of gray. No warmth to it. The kind of gray that doesn't invite conversation, just conclusions. Claire was already inside, leaning against the window ledge like a marketing brochure come to life. She wore a power suit 1 size too small and confidence 5 sizes too big. There he is, she said, like she'd just spotted a forgotten box in a storage unit. Have a seat. I sat across from her, HR rep to the side, young, uncomfortable. Claire took the lead before anyone else could speak. "We've decided to restructure the department," she said, lacing her fingers together like a CEO in a drama series. "Flatten things out. Clear out the legacy bloat." She said it like she was doing me a favor. I watched her posture, the slight twitch in her temple when she tried to maintain eye contact too long. Her tone was rehearsed, like she'd practiced the speech in front of a mirror that morning. I didn't blink, just waited. Claire slid the severance papers across the table. 2 pages. Standard. Legal boilerplate. NDA. Release of claims. A soft pat on the back and a push toward the door. "We're grateful for your time here," she added. "Truly. But we're moving into a new era, and we need a team that understands agile culture and digital-first dynamics." I'd trained executives who now ran Fortune 500 divisions, written workflows that survived 4 rebrands. But none of that mattered anymore. Claire had a title and a bloodline. I had a file folder and a memory. I signed, 1 stroke at a time. Slow and clean. The HR rep nodded. Claire stood, smug smile already creeping across her lips. "Don't worry," she said as I turned toward the door. "We'll delete all the old files. Start fresh." I stopped for just a moment, one hand on the doorknob. I looked back at her. Really looked. The shine in her eyes wasn't power, it was adrenaline. She wasn't running a company. She was playing dress-up in one. She'd mistaken access for authority, mistaken inheritance for insight. She thought she was cutting out the past, not realizing the past had been quietly documenting the future all along. I left with nothing but my coat and a small USB drive I kept clipped to my keychain. No one said goodbye. No one met my eyes in the hallway. Outside, the sun was sharp, bouncing off the windshields in the lot. I walked to my car without a word, each step measured, each breath steady. Some people burn bridges, others build traps into them. She didn't realize the files she erased were already hers. By Friday afternoon, the cracks had widened into sinkholes. Claire's emails started hitting people's inboxes in a panic spiral by 2:11 p.m. Subject lines all in caps. Urgent, system issue, client relations priority, need immediate fix. The tone had shifted from her usual overconfident flair to clipped, brittle desperation. I wasn't in the building anymore, but I knew the rhythm well enough to hear it in my head. She'd gone from smiling shark to cornered fish in less than 72 hours. I watched it all unfold from a bar a block away. Low ceiling, amber lighting, no music before 5. I sat at the end of the bar with a club soda and a lime wedge, my phone face down on the polished wood, buzzing every few minutes with new pings. I didn't check them right away. I let them build up like pressure in a sealed pipe. Gibbons North was the first to pull out, sent a terse email to the executive team. "We're exploring alternate vendors." No explanation, but they didn't need to give one. The misquoted tier debacle had already made its rounds. Claire had followed it with a corrected quote 2 days late, and by then, their procurement lead had gone cold. That client brought in $1.2 million annually. Or did. Past tense. 3 more clients followed suit. By 3 p.m., one of them cited process instability. Another referenced training inconsistencies. That last one made me smile into my glass. The onboarding system she'd streamlined was crumbling. Claire had gutted the manuals and videos I'd built over a decade, calling them cluttered and obsolete. She replaced them with 4-minute explainer clips she filmed in front of a white wall and a rewritten playbook that barely passed spell check. She hadn't noticed I'd left something behind. The revised files were seeded with ghost instructions, non-existent hotkeys, duplicate template links, even a few incorrect service codes that triggered a critical error if uploaded into the quote tool. Not enough to crash anything, just enough to raise questions. Just enough to show she didn't know what she was doing. I hadn't sabotaged anything. I'd simply left the stage mid-performance and watched the understudy trip on her own script. Around 3:20, I finally flipped my phone over. 21 texts, 8 missed calls. The texts were from senior clients, some I hadn't spoken to in years. "Ellis, are you gone? What happened?" The new lead just sent us a quote that doesn't match the scope. Can we talk? Not the same without you. That one made me pause. By 4, the former trainees started speaking up. The Glassdoor reviews came fast, almost synchronized, line after line about poor leadership, disorganized onboarding, toxic nepotism. The timestamps told the story, better than I ever could. At 4:32 p.m., my old contact in compliance sent me a brief message. Filed. Anonymous but attached everything you gave me. Paper trails clean. I looked down at the glass. The lime had sunken. The fizz had flattened. Outside, the street traffic buzzed with the usual Friday energy sales guys trying to hit quota. Interns sprinting for happy hour. Managers pretending not to check email while on their second cocktail. Inside the bar, I opened a new message. I didn't address it to Claire. Not to the sales VP. Not to HR. I sent it directly to the inbox of Charles Vale, the founder. The man who told me on my first day, "Keep this place clean, Ellis." Not flashy. Clean. The subject line read, "Your legacy is bleeding. Here's the tourniquet." Attached was a single zip file, labeled Refton, structure, original. No message body. Just the facts. I hit send. Closed my laptop, paid my tab. Charles hasn't replied. Not yet. The email arrived at 6:02 a.m. sharp. No subject line this time, just a calendar invite marked mandatory, room 7, C, 9 a.m. Monday. The sender. Charles Vale. I hadn't seen that name pop up in a long time. I arrived 10 minutes early, the same way I had for every meeting for the last 26 years. The receptionist looked up as I passed, blinked twice, and stood halfway like she wasn't sure if she should greet me or call security. I nodded once and kept walking. Room 7C was usually reserved for quarterly board reviews, the kind with catered lunches and embossed folders. Today, it felt like a courtroom. Inside sat 2 members of the legal team, the head of compliance, and at the far end, Charles Vale himself. Gray hair shorter than I remembered. He didn't stand when I entered. He didn't need to. He was the only one in the room with nothing to prove. "Ellis," he said, like the word carried weight. "Thanks for coming." I nodded and took the seat they'd left empty at the near end of the table. A bottle of water waited in front of me, untouched. The air was too still. At exactly 9:01, the door opened again. Claire walked in like she was arriving to accept an award. Black blazer, red lipstick, iPad in hand. She smiled. Tight, calculated, all teeth. Then her eyes landed on the thick black binder on the table in front of me. The same binder she had thrown in the recycling bin 5 days ago. Her smile faltered. Charles motioned to the legal lead. "Let's begin." I opened the binder, flipped to the first tab. This is a timeline of communications between Claire and external clients over the past week. I said calmly, 18 exchanges, each one misrepresenting product capabilities, pricing models, or delivery commitments. I slid forward the printed threads, color-coded and time-stamped. Next, we have $180,000 in quote discrepancies, incorrect service tiers, unauthorized discounts, and at least 2 instances where clients were charged below our cost threshold. Claire tried to interject, but Charles raised a hand without even looking at her. She went silent. I continued. 6 onboarding files were overwritten, all stripped of key compliance instructions. 1 replaced with a 2-slide presentation that linked to a non-existent training portal. 4 clients signed affidavits verifying that Claire misrepresented her role and provided falsified, quote, justifications. I passed over the signatures. 1 was from Gibbons North's procurement director, another from a federal logistics contractor, names that carried weight. Claire's face went pale. Charles leaned back slowly, eyes locked on her. "You used my company to play pretend," he said, voice low. "You put our reputation in a blender for the sake of appearing modern. You gambled trust for optics. You fired the man who built the floor you're standing on. Claire opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The legal team didn't move, but 2 security officers appeared at the door like they'd been waiting for a cue. Claire Bancroft, the head of compliance, said evenly. Your employment is terminated, effective immediately. You are to surrender all company property and leave the premises under escort. She stood slowly, face burning, hands trembling just enough to betray the panic she'd buried under polished polish. As she passed me, she didn't look up. The door closed behind her with a hollow thunk. Charles turned back to me. We want you back, he said simply. Same title, full authority. Write your own number. I closed the binder gently. No, I said. This place has already written its ending for me. He didn't argue, just nodded once, slowly. I stood, took the binder under my arm, and walked out through the same hallway I'd once walked in wide-eyed 26 years ago. My steps were slower now, deliberate. As I reached the elevator, a silence settled behind me, heavy and absolute. Legacy isn't a file,